That's better. All right. Now share slideshow. Hopefully Zoom can also see me. Okay, so I put this together for everyone who has ever asked any sort of question relating to film scoring as a career, because I think we're all, even us seniors, are worried about, okay, we're at Berkeley, we made it here, we're in a safe spot, but what comes after that? How do I get gigs? How do I get gigs now? How do I kind of prepare myself for some industry level business? And in a really, really short way of putting it, there's a lot that there can be done. But I think there are a few things that, in my opinion, like should be done first before you start like worrying about like royalties and cue sheets, because that'll come eventually, whether or not you like it or like are prepared for it. So until then, there are a few things that we, both as freshmen and as seniors, can do to kind of prepare for that. So reliability. The biggest thing I think in the film scoring industry is reliability, efficiency, organization, taking initiative, problem solving, good communication. These are like what I see as like things that'll do you very well in getting jobs, getting connections to people and having them stick, and having them like you basically prove yourself as a good employee and someone that people want to work with, because films have tight deadlines, which means things have to work efficiently. It's like a well-oiled machine that has to be like ready to go at any moment. And being very flexible also is a big thing. So we're going to start with time management, which I think everyone struggles with at some level because the big old procrastination issue. So some anti-procrastination tips from me to you is get a consistent workflow. Whatever you're doing, whether it's working in your DAW, getting homework done, your job, if you work at like a cafe or some food restaurant, find ways to like make consistent workflows like a habit for you. And we're going to look in that specifically in your DAW, how to make things efficient, and things that you can do to like get the music out of your head and onto score paper and record it as quickly as possible before you like kind of lose those ideas. Because that's what I started to develop, is like, okay, I have this cool idea in my head, and then I start working on it. And as I do it, I was like, oh, I need to fix my sample real quick. Oh, my DAW isn't set up. Let me wait as I load all of my samples real quick. And then by the time I actually get playing some MIDI notes, it's gone. And I don't know what to write anymore. So making that like process as quick as possible is really good. Google Calendar, we will take a look at that. Time management in terms of like what you have to do, especially once you have a bunch of projects, is really important so you don't waste time. So just to give you an idea, this is my actual schedule from February. I have everything color-coded in terms of importance. All of my school things are in blue, and usually actually the clubs are also in yellow. And then I work stage crew, so every time I get a shift, it automatically links to my Google Calendar and shows up on my calendar. And there is also there's a lot of overlap, so I usually won't be able to go to the Audio Engineering Society Club, etc., etc. And then down in the bottom in yellow, I do try and plan out like social events. So if I get invited to stuff, I want to make time for hanging out with people that I know. And then this is something that I tried this week actually, was specifically scheduling out times for when I complete certain projects. And so Monday and Tuesday, you can actually see I have a 2-hour block for working on a short film I was doing for senior seminar. Then I needed to send out a few emails to get some hip hop artists for another project. Then the next project, the next, and the next, all the way down throughout the day. Um, by the time I got to like 9 p.m., all of those had shifted around quite a lot. So it wasn't like, oh, I stuck to that schedule like minute for minute, but roughly it gave me an idea of like, okay, I only have this amount of time to work on this project, and then I'm going to turn it in. And then I need to move on to the next thing because I just had a ton of stuff to do that day. And then by the end of it, by like 10, I was just kind of eating and sleeping, and I didn't do any more work. But I still got a lot more done if I hadn't, compared to if I hadn't like scheduled things out hour by hour. And that doesn't work for everyone, I will say. So the other thing is kind of figuring out what works for you. Figure out your own weaknesses. If you're the kind of person that gets distracted easily, and like say you're in an apartment of like 4 or 5 people, and your roommates are always being loud and rambunctious, and you want to go hang out with them, make sure that if you have things to do, put yourself in an environment and a workspace where you can focus, get some quiet time, and get the things that you need to get done, so that you aren't putting yourself in a place where you get distracted and won't get work done. So that's kind of like knowing yourself, knowing your weaknesses, and doing yourself a favor and working against them. So organization, I use Google Drive and Google Docs for so many different things. One, because it's easier to just access anywhere I go. I just need internet. So I can log in on the computers here, on my laptop, on my PC at home, and I use it. In the bottom here is an asset list for a video game that I was working on. It's a spreadsheet. I use spreadsheets for multiple things. It's a good thing to kind of tick things off your list. And once you learn how to use spreadsheets, you can kind of edit it to be like, okay, this is done. This needs work. This is being done by a different person. This is being done by me. And you can share it with your director, the game developers you're working with, so that they can also be on track with you. Other things like this are like Trello, a couple other like websites that organize workflow, but it depends on kind of who you're working with. And then I have a to-do list of all of my classes and then some career stuff. And it's just, once I finish things, I cross it out, go on to the next thing, and it's organized by day. So if like I have all this stuff due this day, I put it under that day, and try and work efficiently. This is for recording setups. So this is actually for Lauren had a very large orchestral session last semester, and I assisted with the mic setup, and everything on the left is the inputs and outputs of the actual like patch bay. And then on the right, you have the placement of the instruments roughly in the recording studio.
That sheet is just on like the MPV, like you can just, it's on Berkeley, right? Like download.
Yeah, so you can literally get all of these sheets and their mic lists. So like what mics are in what studios, just by literally typing up MP&E studios on Berkeley, and then find the studio you want. They have the Bridge, Studio One, the Arc, all of them are in there. And you can make your own studio setups for your own sessions. I don't think they'll look at them as we would in our own like student run sessions, but it's nice to give you an idea of how things work. And then another one was something that the film scoring department is implementing right now, which is QDB and ReelCrafter. This is something that as you get into more official work for films, especially, having a Q log is almost industry standard pretty much for, especially if you ever get paid. Q logs are how they track royalties and things like that. So again, organization builds up to things like this. Because if you haven't done any organization on your own of your own projects, and then you get to your first big job, and they're like, okay, here's a Q log, enter it, and you're like, oh, I haven't really done anything like this. It's a little hard to work with. But QDB is great. We used to use MX Spot, which is like this really trashy software. But QDB lets you kind of look at, okay, I have these many cues for my film. Just kind of how I set it up on my asset list for the spreadsheets. I can see what's composed, what I need to work on, what needs revision. There are a bunch of notes and versions and different ways to organize it. But another thing I can share with the director to see, like, okay, this is what I'm working on. This is what you can give me feedback on. And it all just makes things very, very nice and easy to work.
All right, real quick, I wanted to make a slight edit to this recording of the presentation. I didn't end up talking about file storage, which I honestly thought was like a super, super important part of the presentation actually, because making sure everything has some sort of backup, even if it's backing up your hard drives twice, one onto, or like everything onto your computer, backing it up onto a hard drive, as well as some sort of cloud-based backup, is really, really useful and important. I know both me and Lauren can attest to multiple times where we've had a hard drive fail or something crashes or something isn't working. And it's like crucial to have some sort of backup plan if your files or samples don't work. And so I use Backblaze, I use Time Machine, I use a cloud-based backup storage system, which is called WD My Cloud. And then I additionally save things onto Google Drive by just dragging and dropping. Those are just like project files that I really care about, as well as I have a 4 terabyte hard drive. It's HD, not SSD, but it still does the job. And that way, just on my Mac, I have almost 3 backups for all of my projects, my entire computer, because on my Mac, I have the occasional Time Machine backup that saves onto a hard drive. And then I also have Backblaze, which saves my entire hard drive, my backup of Time Machine, as well as my entire computer. And then I have My Cloud, which also backs up occasionally, not as frequently as Time Machine, but it also backs things up onto the cloud. I know other people use iCloud, but as you can ask Lauren, iCloud isn't as completely reliable because it syncs weirdly based off of your internet connection. And sometimes it can off sync things, and then you can open a project and it only has some files. But anyways, I just wanted to make that little snippet about the backups and file storage because it's super important. Also, be able to just navigate your own files properly. And actually, to kind of display this, if you go into literally anything of mine, it will have a music file, Berkeley, career, all of this other stuff. And then I will usually have another stuff for books, clubs, stuff for studio work. Then I will have each year with each class, with each project inside of it, so that I can find anything I need as fast as possible and everything's organized.
So we're going to move on to working in your DAW specifically. This is where I think it is up to you, which is part of like okay, you need to take initiative. You need to maximize your workspace. And that's, no one's going to tell you to. And especially when it comes to your DAW, a lot of it is like very personalized. So it's like, okay, I work a specific way in my DAW and other people work a different way in theirs. And they just need to figure out like how their brain works, what they use the most. and kind of make templates, which we're going to go into, and macros and key cuts and things like that. One thing that I don't think a lot of people use very often is macros, especially in Cubase. They're super, super, super efficient. And I'm going to pitch everyone take the comparative DAWs elective in the film scoring major. I think you have to take Dramatic 1 first, and then you can take that first elective. Kurt Beerwolf goes over macros in both Cubase and Logic, and then from there you can kind of apply that knowledge to pretty much any DAW. And macros are basically like bigger key cuts. So you know how you can like hit FN and then F8 and it brings up a specific window. It's like simple stuff like that. That's a key cut. And then macros are multiple chains of key cuts basically. So you can tell it to run specific key cuts, like export all audio tracks into specific mixdown folder with one button. Or you can have it select all MIDI channels and route them to a bus and make that bus and send it to the stereo output. Things like that, where like you would otherwise have to click in, select everything you want, go make a bus, make it routed to the output. And then if you find yourself doing things like that a lot, make a macro for it. And that's kind of another thing where it's like macros are for you pretty much, because if it's things that you're doing a lot, say you start another project, you always find yourself doing this, make a macro for it. And especially for making like new projects, templates. You can find free ones online, or you can make your own. I suggest you do a mix of both. This is an example of Spitfire has a really massive library called the BBCSO, and it has every instrument in the orchestra. And they sent out a free template for Cubase, Logic, any DAW that you can download, and it has everything grouped, every instrument, every articulation laid out, color-coded, all nice and pretty. They have stem exports already set up. They have 3 reverb mixes, and everything's already routed. Everything's already set up so that you can just plug in your samples and go. I kind of took this and then made my own because I have other samples that I like to use a lot, like Albion 1. I've started to use Vienna more because they're just some samples that I really like. And I've just implemented those into this template. So whenever I have another track for whether it's a video game or a film, I just start with this and then I disable what I don't need. And that like saves me the time of having to click through and have to reopen all of these different samples. And I have a couple templates actually, where it's one is a full orchestra, another is like a synth electronics template. I have another one for sound design, another one potentially for like a jazz kind of score, so that if there's anything I need to write that I've written before, I already have a template for it. And you can save those in Cubase and kind of save them like on your hard drive so that you can bring them to the library. And again, the comparative DAWs class goes over that and how to work that in Pro Tools and or in Logic and Cubase. So I think it was honestly my favorite elective I've taken. And then knowing your samples, that's another thing. A lot of different string samples work differently. So the attack time of like your quiet string patch may be different in Spitfire as compared to the new sign player. And so your MIDI, you may want to quantize things differently. I don't suggest ever like hard quantizing things because sometimes with those samples, it doesn't actually end up playing the sound on beat. It's like slightly before or slightly after. So you need to figure out how to work your samples so that they mix well together. Additionally, a bunch of new samples are coming out with a bunch of mic positions and mixes so that you can kind of customize the sound of the orchestra. And I really suggest taking time and just going through each of your samples and figuring out how they work. If you like see something that you don't know, there's a manual. Read manuals. That is another thing. Like if you want to learn how to problem solve, test yourself almost. Like be like, okay, I need to complete this project. I can't ask anyone questions. I need to figure it out myself. How do you figure it out yourself? Google. We have literally so many opportunities to like learn, whether it's YouTube tutorials or manuals, learn how to use your software and whatever you're working on yourself so that you don't have to go asking people questions every time you run into an issue. And then find like that limit where it's like, okay, I've worked on this a lot myself already. I need to ask a friend, and then I can get stuff done. So again, knowing yourself, knowing what works. And this is something that I've tried to figure out a lot is, okay, should I just figure out everything and be like a jack of all trades? And I made this meme where it's like, oh, you only know how to write music. Okay, that's kind of small brain. And then also knowing how to mix. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Also knowing how to record and set up in a studio. Okay, that's really good. And then composing, orchestrating, conducting, recording, playing, mixing, mastering, doing everything in Abbey Road Studio. That's like massive brain. Because especially if you're working with professionals and they're like want an assistant, or they want to bring someone into their studio and kind of work them up to a composer position, knowing more than one thing, especially on an assistant level, is gonna help you out a lot, because there's already going to be a lot of established composers, so they won't necessarily need music. But say their recording system is giving them some problems, and you step in, you're like, oh, I know how that works. Let me fix that real quick so that you guys can continue doing your job. They would love that. And that's also the kind of thing where it's like, you start to do stuff for them, and they'll bring you up to a position where then you can do the job that you want. So assistant jobs. I know a lot of people don't like necessarily doing that. They don't like getting people coffee. It's not like a great position to be in, but it's kind of how our industry works at the moment. And that is changing. So the other option to that is getting yourself to a point where you're independent enough to where you can make your own like career decisions as like your own business entity. And that's another thing, like learning business is the other step that I was going to talk about. I didn't make any slides, but learning how the business side of film scoring works is like the best way to secure your own like rights as a composer and a musician, kind of, because I know of some horror stories of people graduating Berklee. They're like a singer-songwriter. They record this album and they want to publish it. And so they give it to like a studio to mix it, and they sign some contracts, don't pay attention to the details, and little did they know that they just signed away their rights to all of those tracks to this mixing studio. And now they don't have that album anymore because they don't have the rights to it because they signed it away. And so like knowing how those kind of contracts work, being able to look at a contract and be like, okay, what is this saying? What am I signing? That is incredibly important, especially coming out of Berklee, so people don't take advantage of you. And so you're like, okay, where do I start learning about business? We have an entire music business degree here at Berkeley. Take some electives. Email, just like cold email our professors. I'm sure like they're more than willing to help you, even if it's outside of their own classes. Like if say you can't take any of the classes because you're just gotta fill other credits, email people and try and get a start off for where you can start learning about business. And if not, there are other ways, but it's kind of like taking that initiative is up to you. Move on. Job searching. So I'm actually, me and Lauren, I guess, kind of are in this position. Well, you not so much because you may want to be going to, she wants to go to USC, but other people are like just going straight into
I'm still
jobs.
applying to jobs.
But like you're not necessarily like your focus. I don't know.
No, I'm pretty focused on still applying to jobs.
Okay. Well,
I have multiple options.
yeah. Yeah, so searching for jobs, figuring out where you're going. What do you put out there? And I think for me, I think the best tip I can give in that sense is like give your best foot forward. So it's like make a website, make yourself as accessible as possible to like people you want to work with. So if you have YouTube videos, music tracks, make them accessible in some way or form, so that you can share them quickly with people, whether that's over Instagram or over email or people just searching your name. I think that's kind of how things are working now, especially since things were like so refined to COVID for a while. And then what do you put on your resume? I'm actually going to, because I was working on redoing a couple of mine, is I have 3 resumes now tailored for specific things. So I have a list of education, where I went to school. I took off my high school stuff because like that's kind of old and it's not who I am anymore. So for the most part, get rid of your high school stuff. Some work experience, so any professional jobs. I do find that sometimes even things like, I used to say that I work on at Jimmy John's, like it's really small, but it means that like employers look at that and be like, okay, he hasn't just done nothing his whole life. And there's something about working like at McDonald's that teaches you some things about life in general that I think a lot of employers would understand.
Just in general, if you haven't had like a normal job, you should go get a normal job.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
a waitress for like a couple of years, and a salesperson.
Service jobs, you learn a lot about yourself and the world and Karens and
This
many
works at
things.
Apple.
Apple's a great place. You can get some really good, meet
You'll
some really
get a
cool
lot of
people.
connections there.
Yeah. So some work experience, some musical experience. So a short idea of the music that I've done and the recording sessions I've been a part of. And then skills. I was also talking with Janine, the chair of the film department, about how to list your skills. I recently changed it so that I have like expert and fluent and proficient next to things, so that like I give them an idea of what I'm really, really good at and things that I still like am fluent at, but not like an expert level. And I didn't want to say beginner because then it's like, he doesn't really know that. So yeah.
I was gonna add, I don't know if you recommend this, but at some point in mine too, I put like related courses. So like courses that you have taken that relate to like the job you're applying to, so they see what you kind of went through and what you somewhat have an overall general knowledge of.
And then additionally, I was gonna make specific film and video game resumes. I haven't worked on them yet, but I was just gonna use this as a template to then basically make the composition section a lot thicker. And so like if I want to work for a video game company, They know like, okay, he's worked on these things, and he has a few examples and people that he's worked with. And I may even list like actual contacts so that they can go ask those people, because employers will do things like that. They will call your Jimmy John's boss and be like, hey, who's Kenny? How is he as an employee? Is he easy to work with? Because that's like the easiest way that they can figure out more about you from an unbiased opinion. So there's that. And then where do you look? I think since we're all at Berkeley, I think the easiest place to look is kind of inside and through Berkeley. It'll get more clear as you get to the end of your career here, as a senior and stuff, but you'll get a bunch of resources and alumni that you can then connect to, and go to New York or LA and kind of meet them, see what they're doing, and figure out how to kind of wiggle your way into the industry. Because a lot of people that I've talked to pretty much say that there isn't one way to get into film scoring, and especially video game scoring. Like both of them, compared to a lot of other industries, are very, very new, which means things are still being established. Royalties and how they work are still being like ruled out to make everything as fair as possible. So especially trying to get your way into a secured job, there isn't necessarily one way to do it, sadly. And so for us, it's like, how do we then figure out how to meet the right people and how to present ourselves properly? And an honest part of that is also being friendly. If people don't like working with you, they will let others know. That happens at Berkeley as well.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I think it's important that everybody hears that what gets people employment is not really what you think it would be. People have a lot of pride in their work and a lot of, well, these people should want to work with me, or no one's reaching out to me, yada, yada, yada. And I think that's a really horrible place to start off working. And it's actually really common in this department. When actually the skills that matter that have gotten me jobs have actually been like communication, follow-up, time management, business cards, being, social and taking a moment to shake someone's hand. Like those seem like really small things, but we're kind of entering this culture of that's kind of becoming a rarity. There's a lot of entitlement in jobs. There's a lot of like, oh, people should be giving me jobs. Why am I not getting jobs? And a lot of that is really obvious when employers are that it's very apparent when you meet somebody that has that vibe. And the first thing someone will look at when it comes to employing you is not going to be your reel. It's not going to be your work or your demos. It's just going to be you as an individual. So, a lot of people, especially even I've said, well, I went into film scoring because I didn't want to be like a performer and put myself out there and sell myself. Well, that never changes, and arguably doesn't change in anything you do. And so, if your vibe is, I just want to do the work and I don't, I'm not here to like put myself out there and sell myself, you are going to have a lot of stunting situations where you're going to have issues not getting jobs because someone's going to be so much more likable on spot. Doesn't mean that you're not qualified or anything like that, but first impressions and kind of your communication and your professionalism matter so much more than your mock-ups.
And like, I forgot who it was that this club interviewed once, Michael Giacchino or something. But there's this one thing that he said that always like stuck out to me was that like, be the person that a director or audio editor would like to spend 9 hours locked in an editing room with, because that's probably what's going to happen at some point.
Everybody can learn a skill, right?
Mhm.
Everybody can take a couple days and learn to do a mock-up. Everybody can take a week and read a Cubase manual, but you can't read a manual on being a decent person. So it really comes down. I think someone else, I can't remember who it was, maybe more about maybe PR Toprak. I just remember them being like, I think it was Michael Giacchino actually. It was like, no, we don't look at people's reels when we do our first screens. I don't care about their music because that's not the most important thing. So that's something important to think about. I think being able to advertise yourself as a good learner is also important. you're gonna not know a lot of things.
And also, even to speak on like some student films that I like have applied to through our senior seminar, the films that I got like hired for, or the film directors were like, okay, I want to work with you and not the other two people that applied, were because I made myself like as applicable to the film as I possibly could. Because that's another thing, like you may send in your best reel of like some awesome epic score, but if you're like applying for like a cute little dinosaur movie, they don't want your epic score. They want a cute dino music soundtrack. And like if you then, this is kind of where it gets itchy, is like if you want to inject yourself into the film, be like, okay, I think the film should have this music. How you do that in like from creative to creative is really important and says a lot about you as someone they can work with. But yeah, enough about that. I was going to talk about this building, really blurry image. Who knows where this is? I should see everyone's hand. Yes, it's literally
4 pixels.
because it's the only picture I could find of the front of the building. Anyways, who knows where this is? The Career Center.
It's like a woman.
I couldn't find many pictures, and I wasn't about to go walk in there and be like, leave. Anyways, go here. If you're a freshman, go here. If you're a sophomore, go here. They literally will teach you and have like a document, a very thick document of resume templates.
There's also people specific for composing
Yeah.
in the career center. I was gonna add, I made an appointment a while ago. Make sure you check your time zone because it said it was at 5 p.m. They close at 5 p.m. Tried to make another one. It said 8 p.m. Very confused. Realized they're set in Europe. So make sure you
Yeah.
check that before you make an appointment.
I don't know why they do that,
I
but
was so confused.
because it's literally
It's in
in
Boston.
Boston. I don't know. Anyways, they're like the best resource we have here at Berkeley for the things we've been talking about that like no one uses. Literally, you'd go in there and talk to anyone that works there, be like, oh, thank you for coming. Like, we don't see people. And you all have all these people like, oh, how do I get jobs? How do I get a resume? And they don't go here. And they like get confused because they're like, oh, I don't know. Berkeley isn't giving me the right resources. I'm like, no, you're just blind. And you don't listen to the actual presentations at like freshman orientation where they talk about this stuff. And they're honestly great. They also have these LA and Silicon Valley and Nashville trips that haven't happened, but like they're really great because you get to go
They're doing a Nashville one.
to LA. They're doing Nashville?
Yeah, it sounds good.
I was literally
Haven't
talking.
live, but you got me roasted.
Okay, that's good. Because they were like, they've been trying to get it back on track for like a little while.
Yeah, it's
But-
happening.
Sick. So next semester, go here and talk about the LA trips. Because they'll literally take you to studios and you'll just meet professionals for like a week or two. I don't think they're all paid, but you mostly have to pay. So it's like kind of like a short Valencia, but it's an internship pretty much. And that's something that you can put on your resume. You're like, I worked with this studio for 2 weeks during my time here at Berkeley. There are also credited internships, both through the Internship Expo and some of the senior kind of like, it's like applied directed studies that you can like talk to Sean McMahon about. I don't know about those too much, but they're also options here at Berkeley. And so like being a go-getter and actually opportunizing on things like these, like the sad thing is about half of you will actually go to the Career Center, and maybe by me saying that all of you will go. but that's kind of like the presentations that they do. Like that's kind of like the result of those meetings, even though everyone should be going, even if you just got here.
So can you have like 5?
Yeah, that is true. But I am.
If there's something you want.
Now we're pretty much done here. I think I covered the rest of these. So, yep. Questions?
What would you recommend for, like, I'm in my 3rd semester, what would you recommend as like the ideal internship for a summer?
I can't answer that for you
What was your question?
because who's like the ideal internship? I was gonna say, what are you most passionate about?
Basically anything to do with writing. That's
Okay.
why I'm in film scoring.
That would be your best ideal internship. I say that because I think there's a balance between like doing anything and doing what you want.
Right.
The things that you want to do are the things you're naturally going to be good at. So I think you should shoot for those. And then if not, slowly branch, like say you want to write, this is what you want.
Right.
But there's also like orchestrating gigs.
Right.
There's also orchestral manager, like organizing the players.
Right.
So like find the outer lying like circles of what you want and get related to the things that you want to do.
I would also look at the ones you want to do now, because a lot of them you have to be a junior standing for like some of the bigger ones. And if you look at like the requirements and what they're looking for and kind of build yourself up to when you get to that point, you'll be the most prepared and you'll have like a list and it'll be way less stressful than come here like I don't know where to apply, I don't have
Right.
this qualification.
And if you want to write right now, over break, write a minute of music every other day. Then start every day. Or maybe a week, every week.
I
or every
also
month.
started because I would come a lot where I didn't know what to write. So instead of thinking the whole song, I would make like a logic session of just like little melodic ideas. So I was writing something and then I could go back later and listen to those melodic ideas and something else would pop in my head,
Right.
extract that and put that into an actual song form. So it's something better than staring at it, I don't know what to do.
Right.
And then when you want to apply for things, you actually have things to show off.
I have meetings with students all the time that just give like a lot of excuses of like, I don't have the gear, I don't have the samples, I don't have the keyboard thing, I haven't taken light class. And I've literally told a student, if you have hands and like a keyboard, I think you could probably achieve something. There's just no excuse to not practice yourself. And so like there's just no excuse to not do something on your own time. There's no excuse to not learn a technology. There's just no excuse. If you didn't do it, it's just because you didn't want to. That's the excuse. I, taught myself logic because I really wanted to work in logic most. And, Berkeley didn't teach that. People all the time, well, I haven't taken my first Cubase class yet. Why are you waiting to take your first Cubase class to learn something? If you learn one logic, or, you're going to know Cubase pretty well. And so like, just, I think the hard part of our field is that sometimes we can be the ones that get in the way of our own growth. And, that is actually where I've fallen into it. Everybody here has fallen into the trap of being their worst person to fight to be successful.
Mhm. And I will say, this little video right here was made like pretty much using all Logic stock sounds and like a subscription-based sample library called East West, and that is the exact video that got me like hired for a student film that I'm working on now. So like, don't sell yourself short.
There's also a website called, I think it's like Pixabay. It's a bunch of free videos that you can download to put like behind your tracks and stuff to kind of add more of like a general idea to what your music is, or give something for people to look at, especially when you're posting stuff. Like I like to look at something, it's very visual. It shows how your work can be used in visual. So I just download a bunch of stuff on there.
You do not have to write to picture as a film composer. You can, like to a moving picture, you can just write to an image to put on your reel. or even just have a couple words of description.
Video Game Club does that every month, and they make some bangers of like literally just like I don't know. You go to the club, you'll
Sometimes I just
enjoy it.
write first too, and then I go through that website and I'm like, wow, this really fits this.
Anyways, we like over answered your
No,
question.
you're good. I
Are there
appreciate
any
it.
other questions?
I forgot.
Katie.
So would you have a place you suggest, like, definitely making a website, but where else would you put your music? Like, would you
Oh.
suggest YouTube or like,
I like YouTube.
So I started with YouTube. I thought it made sense because there was some sort of visual, and I literally got stock footage, like just like still images, and just made them a video. Another option is we're going over this in senior seminar. That is not what we want.
Also, you never know who's gonna see your stuff on YouTube. Like if you go on
Yeah.
YouTube Studio, it'll show you like other videos that you can get to your video from and stuff like that.
So I meant to go over this actually. This is rising to be like almost industry standard for how people send demos, both in professional and like indie level. We're starting to use it in the department as well. But it's like you upload tracks and then you can make demos for specific job offers, and cut up like a section of this track and a section of that track and make a reel, and it'll literally like make like a nice little playlist, and you can just play it. And it'll be its own link, which for employers, that's like employers, that's really nice because then they don't have to go looking through your website to find the stuff that they want. You can make them a specific demo for just them, and then you can even make like images and make it artistic. So Real Crafter, look into it, and if not, SoundCloud, YouTube, potentially Spotify. I have a Spotify album of literally my iPhone recording one of the Berkeley pianos at like 2 a.m. in a classroom, and it's just me kind of just noodling around on a piano. I don't regret that because it's just had more stuff for me to like give to people, and people listen. There's like 2 listeners a month, I think, but like I did it for fun. So any other questions, since none of you have started to get up and leave? So I assume you don't have class. We're here.
Something worthwhile this week that's related to what you want to do. It can be really small. Never take time off.
Yeah. I'm actually, I will do a nice little, I was almost gonna, the VGMC, I think I follow them.
Not that one.
No. So I was talking about, oh, here we go. I was talking about VGMC because they do monthly like images, and then everyone just writes music for it.
Oh, I just saw this.
And they have like some really, really good tracks. Some of them are even by the board, but like they take literally a month to write like a music that's just like a minute long. Yes. Took them probably less than a month. There's some other like jazz stuff. And they talk about it. They present it at the end of each month. They get feedback for everyone. So like this is the kind of stuff that you gotta do if you want to be a good writer, is just write and get feedback. So with that, have a great break. I hope you enjoyed. Also, we will be putting it up on YouTube. All of our recordings will be updated soon. So, ciao. See you guys. Have a good break.